let's pivot to the Mike Vrabel thing for a moment. So we touch on this again, but I'm struck by the idea that this thing eventually went to the point of divorce, and again, they didn't trade him. Like, Mike Vrabel has been one of the best coaches in the NFL over the last several years. There's a bunch of different sort of data points that would back that up, and they were like, no, we've decided it's the time to get rid of you. And unlike the Belichick one, where it's like, okay, this is 20 plus years of history, we had some great times, we love you, we're all friends here, however true or not that is, you've earned this. With Vrabel, it's kind of like the ownership feels like they were getting pissed off with him, and we maybe equally on the other side. Like, it seems a little bit more acrimonious, and yet they still went, no, we're not going to trade him. We'll just let him leave.
It really is fascinating because the way in which you went about winning too, where like we're talking about, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, but even ignoring that, like he got the most out of his talent over that 4-year stretch. I think the most from, the first 4 years of his tenure. I think his win percentage compared to the talent on his roster, he was number one in the NFL. Like a 1 seed in the AFC when the AFC was an absolute gauntlet. He went into, they won like at Buffalo. I think they lost at Kansas City, but it was like a 1-score game. There was a stretch of like they won 5 games in a row against the best teams in the AFC, and I think lost a nail biter at Kansas City. You make an AFC Championship game 1 year. And yeah, with a guy you traded a 4th-round pick for, and Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback, with all these patchwork things, they're like on paper we always would not view their team to be as good as they were. And obviously, it comes back to coaching. I think he is a good in-game manager, relative to the rest of the league. Like, a lot of Belichick ties here. The infamous, like forcing the clock to run when you're screwing around with delayed canceled. What am I saying? Declined penalties, right. all those things like that. Like. But what I'm trying to say, though, is like he is a culture builder and a floor raiser and a guy that clearly can win without having elite talent or things of that nature. So, like, that's the guy you'd think would be a trade candidate for sure, as opposed to if you wanted to poke holes and be like, this guy wins because he has a scheme that's perfect for where he's at or because he has an elite quarterback, but, like, we're not totally sure if it'll translate well. I have no doubt in saying Mike Vrabel shows up somewhere and he's going to win you 7+ games unless – the team this year was probably one of the worst teams in the entire league on paper, and they still won some games against some good teams. So it is weird. It is very, very weird because the last piece, like you said, it's been acrimonious for a while now. Like, there's been chatter that his feathers have been ruffled since before the season, that they had a disagreement on, do we run it back? Do we try to tear things down and start over? Everyone's been talking about it. It's been the worst kept secret in the NFL since February of 2022, and they didn't, even try to get trade compensation. It's a fair point.
And I think clearly the biggest failings of the Titans in the last couple of years have been personnel. Like, it's not been, this guy's just turned into a crappy coach and he's losing games he should win. It's like this team has the worst offensive line in the league 2 years in a row. We've already fired one GM for making an absolute, for the shambles of personnel decisions and player selection and stuff. We've got another one in. I mean, the reports there's an Athletic article. I do think, so I don't know if you have an Athletic subscription or not, or if any of the listeners do, but one of my favorite aspects of the Athletic right now is every time there is a, major organizational shift, i.e. somebody gets fired, there's like a post-mortem in the Athletic, right? Like whoever is the beat writer for that guy, plus the national writer. Anyway, they get together, and there's a giant, here's where it went wrong, right? And a huge sort of expose of the entire organization and documenting all the inter-office politics that went down and eventually led to some guy getting fired. And it's across every sport. It's amazing. So there's one for the Titans by Diana Rossini and Joe Rexrode. Let's say that's how his name's pronounced. And they broke down kind of where this whole thing went wrong. And to me, it's a fascinating documentation of Vrabel's complete and total failure to manage up, right? Like, he just sequentially pissed off the owner by not being obsequious enough and being like, yes, owner, here's what, like, you know what I mean? He just went, if I'm doing a good job, it speaks for itself. Why do I need to entertain the rest of this crap? Like, just keep on trucking. And apparently that doesn't fly with billionaires, right? You have to go out of your way to inform and, engage the billionaire. And if you don't, eventually they go, I'm getting rid of this guy. This guy's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it seems to be that way. The interesting thing too is, obviously part of this is personnel control, and it comes back to that.
Yeah,
And I guess I'll kind of like counter myself. I don't know how much control he had during the John Robinson era.
not
Maybe he had a
enough.
lot, but just look from 2020 to 2022, their top 100 draft picks. There's no chance anyone's is worse than this. 2020, Isaiah Wilson, first round tackle, never played.
Yeah.
Christian Fulton, maybe the best pick. I guess Roger McCreary will get there anyway. Christian Fulton, Darrington Evans, decent running back, RB3, RB4. Then you have Caleb Farley, does not play. Dylan Radins does not play on the worst offensive line in football. Monty Rice at linebacker, decent. Elijah Molden, slot corner, safety, sort of plays, whatever. And then Traylon Burks, Roger McCreary, good pick. Nicholas Petit-Frere got suspended for gambling, played a little bit, whatever. And then Malik Willis, a quarterback. Like, that's 12 picks over 3 years where you got almost nothing. Like, you got a pretty good corner in Roger McCreary out of 12 top 100 picks over 3 years. How much of that is Vrabel's fault or not? But we talk about it was good in the beginning and it's fallen apart. There's why it fell apart. You wasted 3 draft classes.
No, I mean, it's been a complete and total personnel failing. And several steps along the way, it sounds like Vrabel was against the personnel decisions that were being made. So, like, if that's what's been annoying you, it sounds like he was right most of the time. Like, in addition to being one of the best, like, in-game head coaches in the NFL. So, he's definitely one of the best in-game head coaches out there. Like, you can see the proof on the field. And every time he objected to or got into an argument with somebody on personnel calls, he looks like he was right. Maybe you should give him more control instead of saying, actually, no, Vrabel, sit back in your box, do your job. We've got the rest covered, because you haven't so far, right? You've made a mess of it, and he's actually been doing a pretty good job despite you ignoring him. But then there's also like pieces. My favorite element, I think, was when apparently Vrabel went to the Patriots Ring of Honor ceremony, where he's honored and blah, blah, blah. And he gave a little speech where he basically was like, this is an amazing organization, won X Super Bowls, blah, blah, blah. Never take that for granted. Not every organization is the same, right? And to Titans ownership, effectively, that was interpreted as, oh, you're taking shots at our organization? We're not as good as the Patriots? I see how it is. And like at that point, relationship's dead. The owner is now upset and you're done. It's just a matter of when. That was your moment where you soured this thing. You poisoned this relationship beyond saving, was just being a little bit too loose with your wording on a random, address to people. Like, you just didn't quite think through the implications of what you were saying. And that's like game over. That's fascinating to me. It's like we're in this multi-billion-dollar enterprise where even a guy clearly, like demonstrably doing a very good job can immediately just poison his entire relationship with like one loose turn of phrase that he probably didn't even mean. It was just like, it was a special organization. I mean, they're literally the greatest dynasty the game's ever seen, and all he's trying to do is say that to the fans. And like the new owner is like, oh, I see how it is. Right, that's it. You're dead to me. Like, you're on my enemies list.
I think there was, I don't know if it was in Dana's article or not, but apparently he got asked by reporters. I may have seen a tweet afterwards. Like, they asked him about that, and he was like, yeah, I mean, like, no one has won.
Right.
Like, it was a very innocuous comment that it's the greatest dynasty in the history of professional sports, which it was. Like, and maybe he also was taking a little dig, but it's very possible he was not at all.
I just think he just didn't appreciate the gravity of what that could mean, right? Like, he's just like, well, I mean, it's true. What are we doing here? And actually, their point was like, do you understand that you may have pissed off the billionaire owner that controls all of this? And he didn't, I don't think, at that point. And then, ultimately, that's what cost him. There was a line in this, I think, that was really interesting. I forget where it was, where he effectively was like, Vrabel just, here we go. Vrabel did not address any of this with Carthon or Strunk, the owner and the GM. The lack of communication increased the tension between them, though the relationship between Vrabel and Carthon remained amicable. Those close to Vrabel said the head coach's approach to it all was, why do I need to address inaccurate information and false reports? So Vrabel is essentially just like, look, if it's bullshit, why would I even engage with it? Whereas the bullshit was like festering behind the scenes, and you do need to engage with it, not because it's valid, but because the people in charge of the building are engaging with it. And if you're not dealing with the same information they are, you are just creating a wedge between you and ownership that ultimately ends up where it ends up, which is, hey, It's not your fault, but we've decided we're moving in a different direction anyway. See ya. It's just this fascinating way the world works, which is exactly the same as like inter-office politics in any random ass job anywhere.
And I guess the last piece, at the end of the day, we always love to try to figure out who did what and said what and all that. And I'm not saying Amy Adams Strunk is doing this, but like at the end of the day, sometimes these are 32 fantasy football teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hire a bunch of people, they pay them a whole lot of money, and for all you know, they're making every single draft pick based on the football they watched on Saturday at the bar. I'm not saying that's what happened here or anywhere, but you don't know. It could very well be the way things go down.